Welcome to another new week of all things people, power, and politics on Detroit's only nightly political talk show. This, my friends, is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. We have a lot to get to tonight and no time to waste, so let's roll. There's so much uncertainty in the economy, but tonight we're taking a closer look at how it's impacting small businesses. Many owners are worried about some of the Trump administration's policies and how it affects their bottom line. Businessman Mark Lee is answering your questions coming up in a few minutes here. And the report card for President Trump's first 100 days is out. How is he doing? Well, that depends on which category you look at. We're diving into those with Oakland University political science professor Nicole Matthew. And the president hitting the immigration issue hard in his first 100 days. And it's the area most voters in a Fox News poll say the president is doing the best job. But one of the biggest criticisms has come from their handling of this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. As you may remember, he was deported to El Salvador despite being here on a work permit and was given protection from deportation back in 2019. The Trump administration claimed he's a gang member, but Abrego Garcia's lawyers say they haven't shown proof of that. And the Trump administration is also refusing to bring him back despite the Supreme Court ordering them to facilitate his return. They did acknowledge his deportation was an administrative error, but today, Border czar Tom Homan said this at the White House as the administration defended the crackdown.
Well, I don't accept the term error in Abrego Garcia. There was an oversight. There was a withholding order. But things have changed. The facts around the withholding order has changed. He is now a terrorist, which means the withholding order set aside. And the gang he was fearing from being removed to El Salvador no longer exists. So the facts around that case are totally different. I'll let the lawyers litigate that.
This president is trying to simply enforce our nation's immigration laws and is facing roadblock after roadblock. So we're complying with court orders, but as Tom Homan has said every day, we're going to continue to forge ahead with this mass deportation campaign, and the president is open to all remedies to do that.
Now, the White House said President Trump will sign new executive orders targeting sanctuary cities, adding he ordered the Attorney General and Homeland Security Secretary to publish a list of jurisdictions they say are obstructing federal immigration enforcement. Now to the Signal scandal involving Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's already under fire for sharing airstrike plans in two group chats. One mistakenly included a journalist from The Atlantic on that app known as Signal. The other, his wife, brother, and 11 other people on that chat. Then there were reports he had an unsecured internet line in his office, bypassing Pentagon security protocols so he could use the app on his personal computer. And now, according to the New York Times, Hegseth's personal phone number was used in those Signal chats. And that phone number was easily accessible on the internet and public apps as well. Those apps included sites like Facebook, WhatsApp, even a fantasy sports site. Cybersecurity analysts are worried national security secrets could be exposed to foreign enemies. Hegseth has denied he posted classified information, instead blaming disgruntled former employees, claiming they're spreading misinformation. The White House has stood behind him. Turning now to the midterm elections, Congressman Shri Thanedar being challenged by two people in the Democratic primary. We already told you former state senator Adam Ollier announced a bid. Now we're learning state representative Donovan McKinvey is jumping into the race as well. The 32-year-old represents Northeast Detroit and part of Warren. He's been in the state house since 2023. McKinney releasing this statement about his run on X, saying, "Our community deserves a representative who actually knows how much groceries cost and why that cost matters for families. Instead, M113 has an out-of-touch multimillionaire who has more in common with Trump and Elon than any of us." That's Donovan McKinney now running against him. Thanedar defending his record in Congress to the Associated Press, saying this: "Voters have a choice between my bold, strong, and proven leadership or Ollier's incompetence or McKinney's inexperience." Turning now to major developments in the Russia-Ukraine war. Russian President Vladimir Putin declaring a 3-day ceasefire to the war he started to mark a major holiday. It's the day they celebrate the Soviet victory in World War II. This comes after the country rejected calls for a 30-day ceasefire, something Ukraine accepted. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with President Trump at the Vatican while both were there for the Pope's funeral. The Trump administration officials are touting the meeting as a success, but are pushing the idea that a final deal could leave some Ukrainian territory in Russian hands.
We need to be grown-ups and realistic here. In any negotiated end to a war, both sides get something and both sides have to give something up.
He sent a very clear message to Vladimir Putin. You hold out long enough, I'm going to walk away from Ukraine and it's all yours.
Now, Ukraine's foreign ministry says the country wants a mineral deal with the U.S. signed as soon as possible. You may remember that's actually a key demand of President Donald Trump. To the trade war now, where there is good news and bad news to tell you about. We'll start with the good. The White House teasing they're closer to trade deals with dozens of countries. The bad news, the U.S. and China, the biggest one of them all, well, they seem pretty far apart. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent trying to ease the fears of retailers worried about a drop in inventory, while Beijing officials believe the U.S. will back down first.
I assume they pre-ordered. I think we'll see some elasticities. I think we'll see replacements. And then we will see how quickly the Chinese want to de-escalate.
They make up bargaining chips out of thin air, bully and go back on their words. It's unpopular and is bound to end in failure.
Now, the World Trade Organization thinks a prolonged trade war between the China and U.S. could lead to an 80% drop in business between those two countries alone. Now to some of the other big stories we're following at this hour. New fallout to tell you about from the shrinking of the federal workforce. Staff cuts in the Defense Department delaying plans to hire at least 1,000 more civilians to help prevent sexual assault, suicide, and behavioral issues. Senior defense officials say the programs are not affected so far, but the plans to have about 2,500 people to do this work by the year 2028 are delayed because of the hiring freeze and cuts. The department could spread out the roughly 1,400 people they've hired so far to fill those gaps until more people are hired. Well, President Trump refusing to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day alongside Columbus Day. Remember, former President Biden was the first to mark that day back in 2021, celebrating Indigenous people, their contributions and resilience. But President Trump has been on a mission to restore what he calls traditional American icons, claiming Democrats tried to destroy Columbus and his reputation. Activists want to shift the focus away from Columbus because of the fact he and his successors exploited Indigenous people they encountered when they came to America. And the Justice Department says prosecutors will once again have the authority to use subpoenas, court orders, and search warrants to try to root out people leaking stories to journalists. Now, this rescinds a Biden administration policy that protects journalists from secretly having their phone records seized. Attorney General Pam Bondi says the move will allow prosecutors to get information and testimony by and relating to the media. But activists point out, and we will too, that some of the most important stories in our history, from Watergate to warrantless wiretapping after 9/11, only came to light because of confidential sources. Well, now to a story that has so many of you talking, and it involves one of television's longest-running shows, CBS News' 60 Minutes. You see, its executive producer resigned last week, saying he's no longer able to run the show independently. President Trump sued 60 Minutes last fall, claiming it deceptively edited its interview with his opponent, Kamala Harris. CBS denied it and released a full transcript of the interview. But now CBS's parent company, Paramount, is in the middle of a merger that needs approval by who? The Trump administration. The news division's former president has reportedly been asked to look at the show's stories before they air, something longtime correspondent and former CBS Evening News anchor Scott Pelley said last night is a new type of supervision. Take a listen.
Stories we pursued for 57 years are often controversial. Lately, the Israel-Gaza war and the Trump administration. Bill made sure they were accurate and fair. He was tough that way. None of our stories has been blocked, but Bill felt he lost the independence that honest journalism requires. No one here is happy about it, but in resigning, Bill proved one thing. He was the right person to lead 60 Minutes all along.
Now, CBS has done stories about the Trump administration nearly every week since January. Owens was just the third top executive in the show's 57-year history. Well, this next one is a story that has so many of you talking. This one is, I should say, on the Fox 2 Facebook page. Here's what some of you are telling me. Cecilia, I don't watch it, so I could care less who leaves. Cindy says, oh my, the comments where people forget we are supposed to be living in a democracy. Anthony says, kudos to you, 60 Minutes. Long live the resistance. All right, the first 100-day report card is out, and people have a lot to say about how President Trump is doing. We're diving into his approval ratings with Oakland University political science professor Nicole Matthew. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. And joining us to talk about President Trump's approval ratings, Oakland University political science professor Nicole Matthew. And it's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
It is good to be with you as we talk about this. As all of you political science professors do, you take a look at this from a kind of a nonpartisan point of view. Just here's what we have. These report cards are important. First of all, this is a president who believes he's done pretty well because he's coming to Michigan this week to tout some of those things. That is not unheard of. We expect presidents to feel proud of their first 100 days, right?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a president who's been extremely active compared to other presidents as well.
And so active on so many different measures here. Let's talk about some of the big ones that he's done the best at. The approval rating for border security, he's coming in at a 55% approval rating, whereas a 40% disapproval, but 55% is a pretty high mark for a really, really divisive topic and one that was really important during the election.
Yeah, and I think people saw the southern border as being out of control, and this is someone who is going to come in, shake things up, and bring some order to it. And I think he really has. In the southern border, we've seen fewer border crossings. Some of the other things he's done haven't been quite as popular. There's a lot of pushback on sending people to El Salvador without due process. And we'll see how some of those things play out in the courts. But I think it makes sense that that would be his highest rated issue.
And one that he ran on as well. But as you say, deportations and immigration, kind of a split bag here. Deportations, a 45% approval rating. And then Democrats, I should say, disapproval is 49%. But what I mean to say is the Democrats and Republicans are so split on this, it kind of makes sense that the deportations are 45 and 49%. Doesn't that speak to where we were coming into this election?
Exactly. And I think that among independents is really where it gets interesting because they seem to be a little less impressed with the deportations. And so that could be a source of worry in the future if independents swing more towards the Democratic position on that issue. That's
so interesting because we often, as I just did, point out kind of the left and the right, but you're saying the independents that so many of the people who are watching are sitting back going, hey, what about me? You know, because there's a lot of independents out there and they're watching carefully what's unfolding.
Right. And Trump isn't going to run for election again that we know of. But the Republicans in Congress who he needs to push through his big, beautiful bill in a few months, he's going to need their votes. And if he's not popular with independents, you might see some of those Republicans from the more moderate districts kind of peel off.
And even as the Constitution says that you can't run for a third term, this is a president who keeps talking about perhaps that being something he would love to do if he was able to change things. But look, right now he has a couple things on his plate that aren't going so well. Tariffs right now. This is a president who promised the economy would be better under his watch. And in 2016, it did quite well. This is a different story here. Tariffs right now, his approval rating is at 33%. Does that hurt his fellow Republicans in Congress right now as they try to tout their support for Trump?
Yeah, it's a hard position for the Republicans to be in because a lot of them actually don't believe in tariffs. They are free traders. Some of them do believe in them, and they might find some more common ground with Democrats who traditionally have been more pro-tariff. But the tariff issue has been a big problem for Trump, and it kind of marks the turning point of his first 100 days was that Liberation Day where he brought out the big chart and said, hey, we're going to impose all these tariffs, and very quickly had to walk it back because the stock market was tanking.
And let's keep in mind that when we say approval and disapproval, these are Republicans, Democrats, independents, everybody who was asked the question, what do you think about this president in his first 100 days? When it comes to inflation, a 59% disapproval rate. This is something that this president claims is essentially temporary. We need to all kind of toughen up and get with the program because these are temporary things. That's something that he is going to stick with, that story, of course.
Well, I think the two things that really won him the election were high inflation and immigration being out of control. And he's he's given a lot of attention to immigration in the first 100 days, and he hasn't really talked about inflation. And the more he talks about these tariffs, the more Democrats make the case that the tariffs are going to add to inflation troubles.
When you think about the divide that we saw between this country, between Democrats and Republicans, and then those candidates who are running for office right now for different offices like governor and Senate, you see a lot of them who sit at this desk with me and they'll say things like, look, people are sick of the divide. Are they sick of the divide, or are people finding camps to be comfortable in?
Well, I think a lot of people relish the divide, and I think that's what drives a lot of people to watch the news, pay attention to what's going on, because they follow it as if it's a sporting event, and they want to see if their team is winning. So I think there's a lot of people who do that, but just like any sport, there's people who are not fans. They just tune in for a big sporting event or a big election, and those people, they vote too. So they matter as well.
I think it was something like 90-some% of the noise that we see on X, or formerly Twitter, is literally 90% of all the noise we see is like by 7% of the people on there. And it kind of speaks and amplifies to the bigger picture. The loud right and the loud left, they seem like they take up all the room, but there's a heck of a lot of people in between.
Absolutely.
So interesting. Oh, one last question. President Trump coming to Michigan. 2016, 2020, 2024, he's always ended his campaign in Michigan. And yet he's coming back 100 days afterwards to take a victory lap of sorts. Not a surprise to you?
No, and he's coming to Macomb County, which is a place of strength for him in the state. And it's really interesting to see how Macomb County has evolved over time to be a very good Republican stronghold. When you go back to early 2000s, it was the opposite. And so it makes sense that he would go to a place like that that really plays into his strengths with reaching out to the working class and auto workers and stuff like that.
Well, I just want to say we thank you for your time here today, because Oakland University, you have an excellent department. You have the head, Mr. Trombor, then you have Dave Dulio, you all do a great job, and that's why we keep having you back. Thanks for your time today.
You bet.
Great to see you, Professor Matthew, Oakland University. One of the biggest things President Trump was elected on, as we just talked about, is your money, the economy. We're taking the questions from small business owners who are a little bit worried, a little bit weary right now, right to an expert. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. Here to talk about the economy and its impact on small business right now, businessman and expert Mark Lee. And Mark, it's always good to have you on The Pulse. Thanks for joining us here tonight.
Absolutely, thank you.
Let's talk. We have some viewer questions we're going to get to in just a moment here, because this show is all about you. And Mark, you're just a wealth of information, so I have some great questions here. But I want to begin by asking you a little bit about where we are with this economy, the tariff situation. So many people are unsure about what's coming next. The stock market has gone up and down. But for small business owners out there, what should people be thinking about?
Right now, they need to be thinking about their cost. Right, tariffs are certainly increasing the cost of doing business. And I think the bottom line is be concerned about your costs. Long term, be concerned about sustainability. Are you going to be able to survive this uncertain economy right now? So I think a lot of these small businesses are concerned about cost, recruiting employees, retaining those employees as well. And the bottom line is just making sure that they have a plan that's focused on the future.
And do you think that most people right now have a plan like that? Or do you think the economy was coasting, doing pretty well, and they didn't even think to do that?
I think a lot of people have been upset, if you will. They thought they had a plan, and the apple cart's been upset. So I think the bottom line is a lot of them thought they had a plan, but they're not good at adjusting right now. And I think the bottom line is they need to understand that you need to be fluid, you need to be flexible, and make sure that you have a plan that addresses this uncertain economy.
Yeah, and the uncertainty is out there. And again, if you believe that this president is doing the right thing, then that's absolutely fine, because he says eventually the things will adjust, and he's trying to get things right. If you're on the other side of the political aisle, you're saying, what's going on here? Either way, you're wondering about it. And so the question that Jackie has, our first question here for you tonight on The Pulse, is, hey, when is the economy going to turn around? Again, if you're in President Trump's camp and you believe that things are going to get better here because of his policies, that's one thing. But if you don't, regardless, when will things, do you think, turn around?
No pun intended, that is the million-dollar question. Yeah. And so when you talk about an uncertain economy like this, we can't predict that. We don't have a crystal ball. Some folks are predicting that we may have a recession later this year. We don't know that. We know that the economy has slowed down relative to 2024. So my prediction would be, although I'm not an economist, is that hang tight for the balance of the year. You're looking at maybe 12 to 18 months before the economy actually turns around.
So it's you got to be patient, and you got to kind of be willing to put up the fight and continue that for a little while. Laura is actually has a question here on the Post. Laura, thanks for writing in. How to reinvent your business during the hard economy?
You want to take a good, hard look at your business model. Right? If you don't change, you will die. Your business will die. So what I recommend people to do is to go back and review your operations, review your financial approach, your strategies, review your relationships. I mean, the bottom line is your business model might be outdated. Think about what happened during the pandemic. Businesses started to pivot. Restaurants were offering different types of services, drive-through, Instacarts of the world started to have these delivery services, Uber Eats and things like that. They had to adjust their business model. So in order to reinvent your business in this tough economy, go back and review all of your operations, review everything that you're doing, and make sure that you certainly leverage what you're doing well. Things that you're not doing well, I wouldn't push them. I would focus on the things that are working for you.
But how do you, if you don't know what's coming next and you're uncertain about that, where do you begin the reinvention process?
Yeah, I think the reinvention process is talking to other people. Talk to your customers. Talk to them. Make sure they understand. Hey, ask them questions. What are you looking for right now? What are you nervous about? And make sure that you listen to them. Make sure you understand, develop plans that will be relevant and germane to them. Don't do things purely out of reaction. You want to make sure that you have a thoughtful process, a thoughtful plan, and make sure you execute that plan.
Yeah, in this day and age, everyone's so used to getting convenience and comfort by swiping something. You can't swipe away a business plan and swipe something else in.
No.
You got to stick to one that you know is going to work and be sustainable. Great points here. Charlene, you have a question here on the Pulse. Thanks for writing in. Charlene says, please ask my friend Mark Lee how small retail businesses will deal with having to raise prices on clothing, shoes, and home items coming from China and Mexico with tariffs. And that's really important. As these tariffs go into high gear, people have to figure out where they're sourcing from, right?
This is a great question. So the bottom line is a lot of the clothes are coming from China. They're coming from overseas. At this point in the situation, you need to look at alternatives. Look at other potential suppliers here in the States. Look at other suppliers that may not be be affected by the tariffs, if you will. And so the bottom line is you need to be fluid, have a flexible plan, and look at alternative resources or sourcing of your products. If you don't do that, the bottom line is your cost will continue to go up, and then you got to make a decision. Do I pass that cost on to the customer, or do I eat that cost? The small businesses cannot afford to eat that cost because they don't have enough revenue in the bank to offset those costs.
But some of the reasons that people go to China and Mexico to buy their stuff for their shops and their stores is because it was cheaper there. And so now you may have to look at alternatives that are here that may raise the price a little bit because it's more expensive to buy from here. But that's a math equation every business
It's a math equation. But let me give you a suggestion as well. If you anticipate that tariffs are going to be here for a while, you've not been impacted by it, go ahead, buy more, buy more, buy more now before buy now, as opposed to waiting later when those tariffs will take your prices up. So you want to maximize the strategies. You want to make sure that you have a plan in place, and don't wait till the last minute because we don't know what's going to be happening in 6 months to a year.
Well, you're a Detroit businessman who's been on the air in so many capacities for decades, helping people understand the world we live in. And Mark, we thank you for doing that here on The Pulse. Great to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well.
Always good to have you on. That is The Pulse for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ruth Barrage. As always, we'll see you tomorrow night.